Welcome back to Archaeology After Dark, everyone. I am, of course, your host, Daniel Rhodes, and my guests today are Allie Smith and Jennifer McCohnell. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you,
us.
Daniel. It's great to be here.
Allie, since you got here first, I'll let you start off. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. As you said, my name is Allie Smith. I am president of Archaeospatial Analytics, which is a company specializing in geophysics and archaeology. We're based out of Fort Payne, Alabama, and we are a relatively new company, and we did some geophysics for the Wallace House.
Jennifer?
My name is Jennifer McCohnell. I am the program and facilities manager at the Wallace Center for Art and Reconciliation in Hapersville.
And that brings us to what we are talking about today. So, this is going to be one of, I think, at least two episodes that we will do on the Wallace House in Harpersville, as Jennifer explained. So, Jennifer, why don't you start off telling us a little bit about the site?
So the site is the former plantation of Samuel Wallace and family. The Center for Art and Reconciliation is situated on a part of that original plantation. So if you'll indulge me a little, I will give you just a short history of the plantation and sort of how the organization came to be, so that we can talk about how archaeology fits into this for us. So the Wallace House site was originally a part of a 5,000 acre plantation. The house, the original house itself, was completed between roughly 1839 to 1841 and was dedicated in 1841. The original builder, Samuel Wallace, was a plantation owner from Virginia who had a tobacco plantation in Virginia. And after participating in the Indian Wars in the South, was granted land, like so many others, to come and build a life. So after Samuel Wallace brought his family down in 1841, he also brought along 63 enslaved persons with him. And over time, the site in Hapersville grew to the earlier mentioned 5,000 acres and grew to have 100 more or less enslaved persons on the site. So from 1841 through modern times, the Wallace House remained in the possession of the White Wallace descendants of the original Samuel Wallace. And down through time, that property just was passed along to various members of the family. It continued to be worked as a farm by sharecroppers, itinerant farmers, off and on through the 20s and 30s. But by the 50s and 60s, no one was living there full time, and no one really occupied the house for the last maybe 3 decades. In the last 5 years, one of the descendants of the Wallace family inherited the house unexpectedly. And in doing so, she looked for a way to do something different with this house. And that is sort of how this organization, the Wallace Center for Art and Reconciliation, came about. And we can talk a little bit more about the organization as we move forward.
So, how do you see this as you want to turn it into like a or a public history center? How do you take a house like this and turn it into
Mhm.
something that people can come and see and learn from while they're there?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. So many antebellum houses are turned into house museums that highlight, center, and celebrate the lives of those who were the enslavers. So we go into homes and there are, you know, furnishings and all of that that would have been representative of the time. And this is a way that the history of the antebellum South and slavery has been told, often without enough or any spotlight on the lives of those who were enslaved. The Wallace Center for Art and Reconciliation aims to do something different. It aims to center the lives of those who were enslaved on the property. It hopes to not just memorialize their lives and contributions to not just that site, but to the country as a whole, but to also help people to understand those sacrifices in a very intimate sort of way. The site at Hapersville, although it is only 6 acres of the original 5,000 acres, has a certain energy or feeling about it. And when you are on the place, you can feel the lives of those who were enslaved and the work and things that they endured to have to live through this. So our hope is that folks visiting the site will have a deeper appreciation for the lives and the difficulties that enslaved folks had to go through, but that they will also, through art installations, conversations, think about new ways that they can interact in the world so that the world can ultimately be more humane and just for us all, is the ultimate vision.
Yeah, that's something a lot of public historians struggle with is they don't want to, re-traumatize people from what's already happened, but they want to shine a light on, people whose voices have been left out in history just because of who they were or where they
Mhm.
were, things like that.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think one of the pivotal things that public historians and archaeologists do is to help unearth some of those stories that have been hidden for whatever reasons, right? So in determining a narrative for history, the person or people who are in control dictate that narrative. So to have a tool like archaeology, like the work of public historians, to illustrate those hidden lives is what makes a project like this work that we've done with Allie and her team so crucial and so important.
So, Allie, what does all this mean to you as an archaeologist?
Well, sure. I think as an archaeologist, we have, I'm sure in history as well, it's something that's said is that archaeology tries to bring the unwritten stories out there. And I think that this type of work that we've been working with Jennifer and the Wallace Center has been great to bring some of those different kind of narratives to light. Um, so it means a lot. It's not something that has at least in the state of Alabama, seemingly hasn't been studied very much. And so it's just a great opportunity to be even just a slight part of that.
So, what role do you play in the narrative that Jennifer is trying to show with the Wallace House?
So we were contracted by the Wallace Center by Nell Gottlieb and Joey Brackner back in spring of 2023 to do a ground penetrating radar survey or GPR. And we were contracted to do about 6 acres of a GPR survey across the Wallace grounds. And the idea being that Nell had grown up there as a child, and so she can remember some of the buildings outside of the house itself, but had since been demolished or disassembled over time. So there were some that she knew and some that were unknown. Some that you might expect from a plantation operation had not been seen or maybe photographed or anything like that. So the idea is we were going to find some known and unknown structures across the site.
So, walk us through the process. How did you plan out how you wanted to excavate the site?
Sure. So the great thing about geophysics is that it's a non-invasive method. And it's something that archaeologists have continuously to try to implement into their methods, into their process. So the great thing about geophysics is that we can kind of get a picture of what's underneath the ground surface without ever sticking a shovel in the ground, which does have its place in archaeology. It's something that it's a very big method over in Europe. And still a big method here in the United States, but one that's continuing to grow. So archaeospatial analytics has tried to bring geophysics to the forefront as the first step in that process. It helps preserve, conserve, and protect our archaeological integrity and the sites that we may be working on. So we use the GPR, and we typically go out and first we have to map the site. So we create grids that we're going to be working within, and we run the GPR across the ground surface in what we call transects. And I do have an image here to kind of show, if you'll bear with me just a second, to show you guys how exactly the GPR works. Let me share this real quick. Okay, good to go. Everybody can see that?
Yeah.
So this is a figure that we use that shows the GPR radar going across the ground surface here. And then on the right here, you have a picture of Claiborne C., our VP and geophysics specialist at Archaeospatial Analytics, using the GPR in real time. And we call this our baby stroller. It's a bit of a joke. I know that I told Jennifer that one of the first times that that we started working there is I call it a baby stroller. It looks like one, just doesn't have a baby. Well, at least it has some sort of baby, something precious, and that's what we call the radar down here in this white basket, right? So
I've never looked at it as a baby stroller, but
yeah,
seeing that
it kind
picture,
of looks like
it's
one.
kind of hard to argue against that now.
That's right. That's right. So we've got the radar in this white basket you can see going across the ground, and this is Claiborne at the Wallace House grounds here. And then this radar is shooting waves down in the ground, and it's sending it up to this computer console that Claiborne's looking at here down here. So basically, what this does is the radar is measuring the time and speed of a radar wave, right? So the speed at which it can penetrate the ground and the time in which it takes that wave to reflect back up, right? So you can see that in this figure here, okay? So we use this to calculate the depth of what we call an archaeological feature. And for folks, I'm going to be using that word probably quite a bit today, but for folks who may not know, an archaeological feature, we consider that an immovable archaeological object, right? So it can be a foundation, it could be of a house, it could be a trash pit, but GPRs are used across many different fields. So it could be things, you could find things that are non-archaeological, like a pipeline or a utility line or something of that nature, right? So we found that this works. It works really well for this specific project. It also works really well for unmarked graves. We found that we've used that across the state and across the Southeast, that it works really well for that kind of work as well. But the easiest way that I think I can kind of bring it home here is the instrument works very similarly to how a policeman may use a radar gun to check the speed of your car. So instead of the wave going out into the air or across air, it's instead being back into the ground and reflected back. So that's the basics of how we do GPR.
So we've established that the site that Wallace House is on right now is 6 acres. Did you GPR the entire 6 acres, or did you condense it into smaller workable areas?
Well, I think for our purposes, Nell and Joey decided on the 6. We had talked a couple of times, and we thought that the 6 acres covered the immediate area of the grounds. But I know, and Jennifer, please come in on this if I'm wrong. But I'm sure that there's probably more acreage of either plantation goings on, and there's plenty of other things that could have been on the grounds in other areas as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, Allie. So the remaining parts of that original 5,000 acres have been dispersed in various ways. There are some parcels that are still owned by members of the White Wallace family. Others of it, like the property that we have, are now owned by the Wallace Center nonprofit. And then there is a cemetery that's also a part of the property that is maybe a mile down the road, but that is also held by another sort of group of White Wallace descendants. But absolutely, there are other areas that could be potential for exploration. The cemetery is one in particular.
So that brings up an excellent point. Since you both have worked on this site now, and the word potential, is something that everybody in the public history and archaeology fields use. What do you both see as the potential of this site?
Okay, I'll start with that. The initial work that Allie and Claiborne did at the Wallace site was out of a hope that in the future there could be representations of those original outbuildings done on site. So there are some history sites that have constructed sort of steel skeletal frameworks of outbuildings. And so that was one original goal for doing this work, that in creating some skeletal outbuildings that showed where a barn was, or where a smokehouse may have been, or where a trash pit may have been, you can get a more complete picture of the plantation economy that was wholly run and maintained by enslaved labor. So that's the first part of what this site can do and how archaeology can help. And then the other piece for me is sort of a future dream, is highlighting or illustrating more about the lives of the enslaved folks on the Wallace plantation. There are records so that we know the names of some of the enslaved people, but there is not a lot of information about sort of the lives they lived, their day-to-day lives, and archaeology might help reveal some of that.
So, Allie, same question to you.
So I think basically very similarly to what Jennifer said, I think the house still stands and is representing something, right? It definitely has a feeling, a connotation to people in different ways. The house itself, maybe the items and artifacts that could be associated with it. And with this work, what we're kind of I think the accomplishment we're trying to have is this visual representation of spaces that are not always all white. I think that's an important key here. Again, we're trying to bring, something here that's unwritten. And I think these spaces represent something that's not just that have these maybe feelings or emotions of some non-pleasant things. And those are important to feel. And I think that those are I think it's important to this work that we hope that the geophysics that we were able to do, that we were setting out to do, helps kind of bring those visual representations that are things that are not just plantation or all white, at least on that part of the plantation.
Yeah.
And I'd like to, if I can add just one other thing to Allie's excellent point, is this idea that plantations are steeped in trauma and terribleness, right? But we have to remember that the enslaved folks who lived on these sites and in these spaces somehow endured that and still managed to live a life, and many of them survived this experience. So it's my hope that this kind of work can help to illustrate those parts of the enslaved life experience, how they managed to get through the trauma and terribleness with a life filled with friends and family, and whatever happiness could be snatched from these lives can be revealed perhaps through an artifact or some such thing as that.
So what you're wanting to do is you already have the narrative, you just want to add details to it.
That's a good way to say it. Yes, we have some names. We do not have specific narratives about many of the folks who were enslaved in the Wallace plantation, but we certainly have the larger narrative of the institution of American slavery that applies in almost all of these situations to underscore it. Sure.
So I guess that's where the part of the name reconciliation comes from, because you want to change the way people look at the way they see this site.
I think that is true. When that new name was conceived, the name of the project, the name of the nonprofit was originally Klein Arts and Culture, and that's a different story as to why Klein and Wallace. But the name Wallace Center for Art and Reconciliation is designed to center the work around the Wallace plantation and around the hope that the organization has for people, not just in Hapersville, not just in Alabama, but people writ large, can come together to perhaps make a better future out of the terrible past, right? And that word reconciliation is the word that the organization came up with to encapsulate that, I suppose.
Yeah, and I like that because, people want to add dimensions to the narrative. Like they don't want to tell just one side of the story now, because that's very I don't want to say, I'm just going to go along with closed-minded, because you need to tell every angle of the story. Because I had this professor a few years ago, he used to tell us that if history isn't making you uncomfortable, then you're studying the wrong history.
Sure.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. History is complex and nuanced and full of multiple stories and perspectives. So, to the degree that history is now becoming reflective of that and sort of revising and retelling stories is wonderful. Absolutely.
So we're getting into the last few minutes of this episode. How do you both see working with a nonprofit like this to actually get something done? Like, I know you both have goals for what you want to do. How can people contribute to those goals while they're watching this episode or after they finish watching it, hopefully?
Well, for me, that is an easy thing. Folks can come out for a visit to the Wallace Center for Art and Reconciliation. They can follow us on social media. We are on Instagram and Facebook. Our website is wallacearts.org, where they can find information about the history of the site, events, projects, and of course, where they can donate if they are so inclined. And beyond that, we hope that interacting with the site that we have and other similar sites and experiences that try to reconnect us and help us find our common humanity. We hope that people will engage with those sites. That's how I see and we see that this work can be done and forwarded.
So, Allie, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think Jennifer said it very well. Get involved, get involved with the local community, get involved with what's around you. And I think, a lot of people think, or maybe there's a misconception out there that archaeology is something that happens somewhere else. It's not something that always happens, right here in our backyard, right? I mean, the Wallace House has done an incredible job, not only promoting, some of the things that they're doing for the community, but also connecting the past and the present. I think that what the Wallace Center has done is create, opportunities and through art and different programs that they have to get the community to just see what people in the community are doing, and I think that with archaeology being a part of that, it hopefully helps bring some of those things together.
Yeah,
And if I might add,
no, you go
if I
ahead.
might add one other kind of thought, as Allie was talking, when folks engage in things like archaeology day, right? If there's like a public archaeology day, or where people come out and sort of see examples of archaeology in action, it can sometimes stimulate a love of history that you may not get in any other way, because they see this object or this thing and they're curious about it. So in that way, archaeology can help us to get people more interested in history. And we know history informs our present so that we don't repeat, those mistakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. There's something just about the way archaeology and history go together. This is just my opinion that, you hear a story in history and it's just that, a story, but then you go look at it from an archaeological perspective and somebody presents you with an object that relates to that story and you're like, wow, okay, this isn't just a story anymore. This really happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that is just about going to do it for us today on this episode. So stay tuned for more. And ladies, I want to thank you both for allowing me to contribute to what you're doing at Wallace House. I really appreciate it because this putting this episode together has been very much a group project.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel, for featuring us, and we're excited to see what comes of this, and we'd love to come back and talk further.
Absolutely. And that is wholeheartedly what we plan to do. So, like I said, stay tuned for more, everybody. Bye.